Hello, I'm Dr. Harriet Fraad.
And I'm Julianna Forlano. We're here with our podcast, Capitalism Hits Home.
This is a show about the intersections of class, gender, race, and all the aspects of our personal lives.
We aim to educate, activate, and hopefully even alleviate some of the burdens we all experience living in a capitalist USA.
We hope this program serves you well. It's brought to you by Democracy at Work.
Our main topic for the show today will be the effect of capitalism on personal creativity. We'll also be getting to the headlines in a moment, but right now we thought we'd start out with the segment we often start out with, is when we briefly share with you how capitalism has hit us at home since last week. Harriet, would you like to start?
Yes. How capitalism hit me at home is that I went back to New York City for a week, and the whole city felt differently because the relentless money-grubbing capitalism of Donald Trump was lifted from the city, which was in dread of his attempts to stab us to death through denying us funds. The whole feeling is palpable walking around New York now, the feeling of relief and joy. So that was my
That's so
personal.
great. I love New York City so much. And just having lived through the beginning of the pandemic there, it was quite sad to see all the beautiful things that we love so much about the city be shut down, the museums, so I haven't gone back myself since I left a few months ago, but I'm happy to hear that. And also I'm feeling a little left out now because I don't live there anymore. We'll have to go back once circumstances allow. I was thinking about how capitalism had affected my life since last week, and I went to I don't want to name the name of it, but I'm sure if I describe it, you will know what I'm talking about. So I had the universe conspired to allow me to do one of these sort of enlightenment encouragement weekends that are hosted by people who are very encouraging of people starting a business, and they obviously make money because that's their main business. And it was great. I'm not going to lie. I really enjoyed it, but I'm not sure if there were any other radicals in the audience but me. First of all, we didn't go anywhere. We were doing it in our homes. So, we're pumping our fists and screaming, yes, we can, while at home in our basements all across the world. It was kind of beautiful, in fact. But one of the things that struck me is the person who was leading it at the time was talking about the leader of Amazon and Jeff Bezos, and how he started with just books and he just launched this thing. And now he's like a gajillionaire, and isn't it wonderful? And I'm thinking, well, that's where I got to stop you.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't want to lose the power of the woohoo, can do spirit kind of thing that they were trying to put forward. Um, but I was like, well, he kind of makes money off the backs of the people who actually do the work part of the thing that he does. So I don't know. Again, I felt isolated in my thoughts about, I wasn't going to raise my hand and be like, how can you address? I mean, it wasn't that kind of thing. But, I'm hoping there are other people there who are like, well, I work at Amazon and I feel like, how can I bow down to Jeff Bezos because he had great ideas? And they kind of make themselves feel better by donating money, personal cash. And they all have these charities that they kind of are giving money to. But wouldn't it just be better if they ran their company in a way that didn't cause you to need to donate to charity? Do you know what I mean? It was just like libertarianism at work. So anyway, it was just something that I saw while I was out and about in my life that I thought you might enjoy. I'd love to hear from in the comments if any of you have had something I tried to do my best to separate that from like the positive things that they were saying. that could be helpful to my own clients, myself, my friends, etc. So there you go. Harriet, have you noticed anything like this?
Well, what really impacted me this week was reading about these vaccines and realizing that A, since they're for profit, and since it's not a World Health Organization effort, and since they will be jockeying to get more and more money for these things, they're not to be trusted, because wherever the market
Thank you.
driven healthcare system raises its ugly head, when people die or are injured, that's collateral damage on the route to profit. And so that there are reports of people distrusting these viruses quite sensibly. And so what struck me this week was the vice that's tightening around us between a need for a vaccine and a profit system that makes a vaccine pretty shady and
You
frightening.
know, it's not only the need for a vaccine, but your children need to be vaccinated in 100 different ways these days. Um, Otherwise, they can't attend public school.
Right.
And I'm wondering what additional restrictions will be put on people who say, well, I'm going to wait until we get the vaccine. There's more testing, or I think I'll just
Mm.
still stay in my house until, or maybe I'll get the one from Germany. I remember when I gave birth to
Yes,
my
or
daughter, I
China.
really wanted her to
Yeah.
have the vitamin K from Europe because it was orally administered instead of jabbing her as if she's a non feeling thing when she's born. I'm like, she could drink it. That's what they do in Europe. I'm not saying don't give her vitamin K. I would like oral administration. And they said they were going to call the child protective services because I wanted to give her the thing orally, which I got from Europe. Anyway,
Right.
that's a whole nother story. So, it's not only the profit motive, but it's like the government collaborating with the profit motive, in a coercive way. If we could trust a vaccine, I would be all for it. But I agree with you, Harriet, that the profit motive makes it very difficult to trust. And it also springs up these movements that are, you know, maybe a little bit anti-scientific as well. So I don't know.
It's scary because the gears of capitalism mesh with one another. So the schools mesh with the profit system, with the pharmaceutical companies, with the hospitals, with the doctors, with the insurance companies. And so you're caught like Charlie Chaplin was in the gears of the factory machines on which he worked. And it's very frightening because it's hard to withdraw. And so that if they require that your child is vaccinated with this vaccine and you worry that in a year or two it'll turn out to be dangerous to her, there's very little space that you have.
Especially when you could do it another way. Like, can I
Yeah,
just do it another way? I'm not saying don't give it to her. I'm saying, yeah, that
right,
was a whole thing.
right.
Um, in the news, another story in the news that got me, in addition to your vaccines, in terms of capitalism, was that the Government Accountability Office released their findings on millions of Americans who work on at these low wage jobs that they must rely on federal assistance programs to scrape by. So this contradicts the conservative, racist, and classist fairy tale.
Yes.
70% of Americans receiving federal assistance in some form or another work full time. Nobody is laying on their couch getting a fat check. And of those Americans who are fully employed, most of them work in private sector, the sector republic, or excuse me, certain groups like to call the job creators. More than half of those recipients of Medicaid and SNAP, which is, popularly known as food stamps or food assistance, work 50 to 52 weeks a year. There are only 52 weeks in a year, so they're working,
Oh,
every week, all the time, and they still have to get food stamps. Walmart and McDonald's are at the top of the list of employers with business models that rely on the American taxpayer to pay for their workers' health, food, and housing. The other ones, include Dollar Tree and Dollar General and Amazon and Burger King and FedEx rely on not paying for
Yeah, that's socialism
their,
for the rich only, where the government backs them and allows them to make a profit at our expense. Another story that hit me really hard was that one out
Oh
of
wait,
six
wait,
Americans.
hold on, Harriet.
Well,
Wait. I
sorry.
want to make the point here that some of these states that want to roll back SNAP benefits, meaning no thanks, we don't want to give people food stamps. We'll just let them starve. Arkansas, Georgia, Indiana, Maine, Massachusetts, Nebraska, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Washington. Washington, supposed to be blue. Walmart employs 14,500 workers that get that benefit. And then McDonald's employs 8,780. That's according to Bernie Sanders' team, who is the team that encouraged the Government Accountability Office to release this data. In 6 states that reported Medicaid enrollees, Walmart topped the list again, 10,000 employees. So they don't want their employees. So they're basically saying, these states, I don't get it. There's people there and the lobbyists there are saying, we don't want to give you food stamps. We don't want you to have health care. Some of those people who are going to lose their food stamps and health care are voting for that because these are mostly Republican states, except for Massachusetts and Washington. It just blows my mind that would be okay. They're trying, the states themselves want to cut the SNAP benefits, and those corporations rely on the SNAP benefits. I don't really understand how this comes together and works, Harriet. Do you?
Yeah, I think I understand a corner of it, which is I think that there's two kinds of survival: physical survival and psychological survival. And I think Trump's supporters choose their psychological survival as great and white and superior and part of the greatest country ever without looking at any of the problems. And that means more to them than their physical survival. 1 out of 6 families in the United States goes hungry. And these people are cutting their own food stamps and their own
You'd think
survival.
that these,
They feel
you'd think
great.
that the yeah, you'd think that these corporations would actually want and lobby for SNAP and for Medicaid so that they don't have to pay them. You think they would want that, but most of these corporations, definitely Walmart, are all funding, the party that doesn't really want to give
Yes,
food
because
stamps
they
as
don't
part of their
care. They
ideology.
don't care. They're on the road to
Unbelievable.
profit. And death is collateral damage, illness of your children. It's all collateral damage on that great road to profit as far as they're concerned. And that's the trouble with capitalism. It takes away your compassion for people and your connection to people and people's creativity where you're working. I
Yeah.
have, go ahead. I didn't
Oh,
mean to
yeah, we're
interrupt.
going to get into that because that is our main topic for the second half of the show. But I do want to thank everyone who's watching. I notice we have more and more viewers, which is exciting to
Yay.
me. And we do want to thank you so much for any contributions that you have made. I notice we have more contributions. I think I've been saying this during the the middle of the rest of the shows. If you've been watching, this might be a repeat, but you can support our show Patreon at patreon.com/capitalism hits home. That's where you sign up for the kind of thing, give $1 every month, give $5, give $500. Hey, will you put it to good use? Um, Democracy at Work sponsors this program and supports us at this point. We are not fully self-supporting, but in an effort to become fully self-supporting, we'd like to give the show once a week instead of once a month or something like that. So we're asking people that if you have a little bit of extra money, we would love your support. We ask for your support. And also, I do want to remind you that if you don't have any extra money to spare, that is fine. We still want you to come. We still want you being part of our community. We want to hear your voices. If you could share our podcast, our podcast is out there too, but if you could share our YouTube with your friends, if you think it'll be helpful to them, that would be great as well. So I do want to thank everyone who's already contributed. And if you can add add us to you can make a one-time donation, you can make a recurring, whatever. Patreon.com/capitalism hits home is the place to go. And also thank you to Democracy at Work, the network that brings us to you right now. On our big show thing. I was okay. So Harriet and I both agree that this would be an excellent topic. The idea here is, what is capitalism's effect on personal creativity? And I was recently running a group where people are recovering from the effects of trauma. And as a part of the recovery process, we take a look back to see what thoughts and lingering beliefs that were formed in response to the trauma are continuing to play out in a person's life and cause pain, etc. And over, I see the same thing. It's not just the trauma. It's it's that capitalism and the system in which we live, capitalism specifically, actually traumatizes people both directly and intergenerationally. Not only do things like food scarcity or lack of social safety net create fear in the specific person who's living through them, it can create fear in, say, the generation before you, who then acted out of that stress and fear as they were trying to parent you. And maybe they parented you in a way that caused trauma to you and destroyed your childhood. So I had a client who had been terrorized as a child around the topic of scarcity, specifically financial scarcity. She grew up to tenaciously pursue education and took what many parents would call a nice, safe job. She went to public school and she went to a public university, which is still costs money. You still need, and she worked through it, etc. She was not really a person of means. And she took a nice, safe job as an accountant, which of course she hates. And she's more or less financially stable. She can afford food and clothes and things like that. She has a place to live. But recently she was encouraged to take a writing class, and she took the class, and she basically blossomed in the course. It was just 6 weeks. And when she discussed it with me at our group, she broke into tears that the amount of time she had to shove her true self and her creative self into the basement of her being and lock it away and suppress it in order to run away due to financial fears all came flooding back. It occurred to her as wasted time. She felt like she had just met herself for the first time. And, I make the point here, I wanted to, a quick caveat that basically anything you do could be true to yourself. You can be an accountant for the right reasons, that it feels true to the core of your being. I once literally had a friend who was an acclaimed opera singer whose parents had forced him into it when he wanted to be a scientist. And at the same time, I was dating a scientist whose true calling he believed was to be singing opera. It was, that's a true story. Anyway, but capitalism doesn't give the majority of people the space or the tools they need to blossom in this way. There's no social safety net. Um, so we wanted to talk about that. And also the fact that the big argument I hear from the business gurus, which I talked about a little earlier, is that socialism crushes creativity, that competition is the only thing that brings out creativity. And I, of course, think the complete opposite, especially for the traumatized. A safe space where you're not going to die if you get a little bit of cancer. You know what I mean? It's that is the space that brings out creativity. Harriet, your thoughts in this area?
Well, I had an experience this morning that just enhanced the thoughts that I have because I talked to a client who loves music. Her husband does too. And they both work in an Amazon store. And by the time they get home, they're so dispirited that they can't play their music because they're too depressed, they're too dispirited. It took too much effort to try to ignore that they're being exploited. And it reminded me that the kind of jobs that they can have are killing to the spirit of the art form they want to pursue, and how costly that is, and how kids whose parents have money can get music lessons and fencing at their fancy private schools and dance lessons after school and all these other things. And that capitalism apportions services and opportunities by the amount of money you have, which is cruel because the mass of people are denied their creativity, and can be very depressed and give up on life. And socialism would give people a chance, even a poor little country like Cuba, which is very poor. Every child gets milk. Every child who's gifted and wants it gets dance lessons, music lessons, because the priority is to share what you have and get out there. And they are a socialism that has suffered boycotts from the United States and other things. But under socialism, there's a greater chance to give that to your people. And when I looked at who's creative, who's a socialist, I looked at it, I thought about it. I thought, wow, Albert Einstein, one of the big creators of our time, was a socialist. He wrote the
Mm.
ABCs of socialism. Pablo Picasso, another huge creator of our time. Helen Keller, who was deaf and mute and became one of the most powerful figures in the United States, was a socialist. She was able to get special tutoring because her parents had money. If she were deaf and mute and her parents didn't have money, too bad for her. She'd be isolated the rest of her life. Martin Luther King talked about in his letters to Coretta Scott King how much preferable socialism is to give everyone a chance than capitalism. James Baldwin is another socialist who's an enormous creator of our time. Alexandra Kollontai, one of my great stars in my firmament, was the first cabinet member in the world in the Soviet Union in Russia after the revolution. And she also wrote wonderful novels and as well as political treatises, and had been minister of propaganda in the Bolshevik Party because she spoke 10 languages. Antonio Gramsci, even AOC, Alexandra Ocasio Cortez, who is one of the most creative and daring voices in Congress, or Nelson Mandela, or George Orwell, who wrote Animal Farm and
Mhm.
1984 as kind of warnings of where socialism can go wrong, as it did under Stalin, or Jacinda Ardern, who is the Prime Minister of New Zealand, the Socialist Labour Prime Minister, who has just passed wonderful opportunities for women's labor, or the
Mm.
people who won in Congress lately and who've added themselves to the squad, whether they're Cori Bush in Missouri or Mondaire Jones, Richie Torres, or Jamal Bowman in New York, the new Congress people who have new visions for Green New Deals and a possibility.
Harry, what do you make of the idea that, competition brings out the best in people? It might bring out the best. My thought is it might bring out the best in people who are competitive, but there are bests in all people, you know, and I
There
think it
are.
crushes the rest.
And also, you learn if you're poor and you don't have the opportunities. Too bad for you, honey, you can't even compete. So, capitalism, even in terms of its own perverse idea that competition is the supreme way to be creative, is impossible. And of course, it isn't true. Nurturance is important, having opportunities are important. And those things should not be allocated depending on the amount of money your parents have. They should be there for
One of
everyone.
the things One of the things I was thinking about is always on our minds because we're supported by Democracy at Work, and they talk a lot about worker co-ops, democracy at work. So this idea that if workers own the means of production via the co-ops, that they would personally benefit from their own efforts and their created juices would flow, as would the sense of pride in the success or the ability to learn from their own problems in if there is a failure. I'm sure working at the Dollar General, the people who are working at forced to work at the cash register at the Dollar General are not becoming first-rate entrepreneurs as they ring you out for your 99-cent dish rags. You know what I mean? It seems like if you have a stake in the company, that is what would bring out your creative spark, your commitment, your feeling of contribution, and your feeling of getting the reward that you kind of deserve, if that makes sense, the reward of everyone's joint labor and not just being paid 7.25 an hour over and over, no matter how hard you work or no matter how not hard you work.
Yeah, well, what you're saying is so powerful. In the city of co-ops in Mondragon, Spain, there are about a little over 100,000 people working at co-ops. And it's their slogans are entrepreneurship and innovation. And they are so creative that Microsoft has rented space in Mondragon to just get in the environment of creativity that people have when they're designing their own future and they're participating in it and they're empowered and they're respected. That is such a different feeling than being like these clients of mine who work at Amazon, from being depressed because they have no say. They're serving
Yeah.
someone who's utterly indifferent to their health and their welfare and their education.
Can you believe that we are done? We have 2 minutes left to wrap up the show. It was such a wonderful discussion, and I really loved how you pointed out all the creative geniuses who were socialists. And I think this is definitely food for thought and something we're going to have to revisit. We like at the end of the show, if we can quickly do it, to give you some little nuggets of maybe how to live through these times where we're living in the capitalist USA and we might not make it in our lifetimes to switching the USA to another system. So, in the meantime, my suggestion would be to make sure you have a little bit of creativity, at least 2 minutes. It's not that hard. You can, in the bathroom, I don't care if you sing while you're at the bathroom at Amazon, or on the bus on the way home. You don't have to like make yourself into the target for arrest. But, you can just 2 minutes of your own creativity, either dipping into someone else's or doing your own. And that will keep your heart alive as you have to live through these times. Harriet?
Those depressed clients have decided to join TikTok and do their music on TikTok and join with other people who are musicians. And so that they don't feel at the end of a depressing day where they're laboring for someone else's profit who's already the richest man in the world, that they have something which fosters their own creative spirit. And we all need that in our relationships with people, in our artistic endeavors, and not because we hope to be famous, but just because we are creators and we need that creative power in our lives.
Thank you
So I
so much for listening to this podcast. I'm Julianna Forlano. The podcast is made possible by Democracy at Work. We again ask that you support our project. We'd like to be fully self-supporting through the contributions of our viewers and listeners at patreon.com/capitalism hits home, where you can visit us at democracyatwork.info. Put suggestions for news stories or topics you'd like us to cover in the comments. I'm starting to talk really fast, like Amy Goodman at the end of Democracy Now! Please send us your feedback. We love hearing from you. Our Twitter handle is democracy at WRK, Instagram democracy at WRK. I'm Julianna Forlano on Twitter, and you can find Harriet at her website, Fraad, FRAAD.com. Did I get it all?
Yes, at record speed.
With 11 seconds to spare. Harriet, thank you. This has been a joy as usual.
This is a joy. And so we can say goodbye and thank you to all of our listeners for bringing out the creativity in us. And we hope we can bring out the creativity in you as well.